Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
He's been Theresa May's right-hand man for 7 years, first as her Home Office advisor and now as the Downing Street Chief of Staff. But Nick Timothy is tonight facing fresh questions about his role in the 2015 general election, where police are investigating whether the Conservative Party properly declared its campaign spending. A cache of secret documents, which we understand has been seen by Kent police, reveals Mr Timothy played a central role in the local campaign that defeated Nigel Farage in South Thanet, something the party has always denied. Our political correspondent Michael Crick has got hold of some of the documents. Michael.
He's been called the most powerful man in Britain. And as Joint Chief of Staff to the Prime Minister, Nick Timothy may even deserve that accolade.
18,800.
But before moving to Downing Street, Mr Timothy was credited with masterminding the Conservative Party's crushing defeat of Nigel Farage in South Thanet at the 2015 election. For almost a year, Kent police have been investigating the party's spending in Thanet after this programme revealed the Conservatives apparently spent tens of thousands of pounds campaigning locally for their candidate, Craig McKinley. We showed they'd spent £14,000, for instance, on rooms at the Royal Harbour Hotel for a crack team from Conservative HQ, and thousands on other items too. Money that doesn't seem to have been properly declared on McKinley's spending return. Should it have been, McKinley's campaign could have smashed the legal spending limit of just over £15,000, a cap designed to create a level playing field. Last year, we asked Mr Timothy to do an interview about his role in South Thanet, an offer he declined. Mr Timothy, my name's Michael Crick, I'm from Channel 4 News. This week, however, we finally caught up with him to get his account. Last November, we asked Nick Timothy a simple question. Had he worked on the local campaign in South Thanet? The Conservatives issued a statement. Mr Timothy's job, they said, was to support the then Home Secretary, Theresa May, and that he provided assistance for the Conservative Party's national team. As for his relationship with Craig McKinley, we were told, Mr Timothy would have given advice to any candidate who asked for it, and indeed did so. Tonight, however, Channel 4 News can reveal new evidence which tells a very different story, seemingly placing Nick Timothy at the centre of Craig McKinley's local campaign, and potentially putting him in breach of civil service rules. As early as the 26th of March, an internal email titled South Thanet Update lists help needed and states simply, Nick Timothy here, ASAP. Mr Timothy's name also appears on the Conservatives' South Thanet contacts list. By the 29th of March, Nick Timothy seems to be very much involved in South Thanet, even down to the words on Craig McKinley's local leaflets. In a series of emails with Marion Little, Conservative HQ campaign specialist, Mr Timothy asks for a change in approach to the local campaign. Mid-afternoon, he writes to her,
"Are we not putting two-horse race on everything? Don't we need to?"
An hour and a half later, he sends an email to Marion Little and other senior Conservatives entitled First Draft of Messages. He says,
"Let me know what you think of the first cut of the message sheet. Please don't circulate it any further at this point. I don't want to upset people locally before I've got there. We have to define this as a two-horse race between us and UKIP as soon as possible."
Around a week later, this leaflet was dropping through letterboxes in South Thanet. It couldn't be closer, it read. Election in South Thanet is a two-horse race between the Conservatives and UKIP. Seemingly the exact strategy conceived by Nick Timothy only a few days earlier. Indeed, Mr. Timothy's fingerprints are apparently all over this local literature. And at the bottom it says, promoted by Nathan Gray, Craig McKinley's election agent. The Tories didn't mention this when we asked them last year about Mr. Timothy's role. Peter Wallace was campaign manager for Labour in South Thanet in 2015. He says this Tory leaflet knocked Labour out of the race.
The message that came from Nick Timothy is absolutely extraordinary. It is word for word. What he wrote in this document is translated into the leaflets that went out on the doorstep as appearing to be the message of Craig McKinley. It's absolutely extraordinary. We didn't think they would win, but when you knocked on the door in those final few weeks and people were all repeating like a mantra, it's a two-horse race, Labour can't win here, I get the strong impression that it wasn't that local campaign that won it, and they wouldn't have won it without the intervention of Nick Timothy and the sheer amount of money that was pumped into the area.
And Mr. Wallace says any costs linked with Nick Timothy's Thanet role should have been included in Craig McKinley's legally binding spending return.
If people came in to write leaflets and stay in hotels, people like Nick Timothy were running the campaign from outside, and that wasn't declared as a local expense, then it should have been. You deserve to be fair and open and honest with people and say that this is what we spent and this is who was involved in the campaign and this is how much we spent and when we spent it.
There's another issue. Last year, the Cabinet Secretary, Sir Jeremy Hayward, told Channel 4 News Nick Timothy had complied with the Code of Conduct for Advisers because he didn't start his campaign work till after he resigned as an advisor to Theresa May on the 30th of March 2015. But the emails we've obtained show that's not true. We know Nick Timothy was radically rewriting the South Thanet leaflet the day before he left government, the 29th of March, an apparent breach of the advisor's code. The Cabinet Secretary now tells us that since that day was a Sunday and the day before he was due to leave anyway, it's not worth him investigating. So what was Nick Timothy's response to all this when we found him on his way to Downing Street? Mr. Timothy, my name's Michael Crick, I'm from Channel 4 News. As we know, we've been looking at the South Thanet campaign in 2015. Could you explain to us what your role was in that campaign? You seem to have played a pretty close role in it. People say you were the brains behind the campaign. Would that be a fair description? We've come across documents showing your phone number on the contacts list for the campaign, another document saying get Nick Timothy here as soon as possible. We've got an email here that you wrote on the 29th of March. I mean, our evidence suggests that you were working on the campaign before you stopped being an advisor to Theresa May at the Home Office. You wrote this email on the 29th of March. Do you recognise it? This email suggests all sorts of changes. This email suggests all sorts of changes to a campaign leaflet. Lo and behold, here is the campaign leaflet, and all your changes are on the leaflet. You clearly had a big influence on this campaign. How much do you think it cost for you to stay in South Thanet at the Royal Harbour Hotel and everything? Shouldn't those costs have been on Craig McKinley's campaign expenses? Have you been helping the Electoral Commission and the police with their inquiries? Have they spoken to you? Don't you think, as one of the Prime Minister's top advisors, you should be acting with transparency on this? The Conservatives say all their spending was in line with the law. They said nothing more today about Mr. Timothy's work in Thanet, apart from repeating he was a party volunteer whose role included briefing people on Home Office matters. We understand that all these new documents have been examined by the Electoral Commission and the police.
Well, and Michael's got into Downing Street himself now, and I hope you got your breath back. Michael, where has the expenses investigation got to?
Well, there are a lot of people in politics who seem to think it's all gone away. It certainly hasn't. The Electoral Commission's long investigation into our findings is due to report within the next few weeks. Meanwhile, the police have been quietly interviewing people. One of them includes Alison Hernandez, who was the Conservative agent in Torbay and now, ironically, is a police and crime commissioner for Devon and Cornwall. But if the police and the Crown Prosecution Service are to go ahead with prosecutions, they're going to have to get a move on, because under election law, there's a deadline on prosecuting. It varies seat to seat, but it's roughly the end of May, early June, depending on the seat. In other words, 3 months away. If there are to be prosecutions, obviously South Thanet must be quite a prime contender. The people who'd be likely perhaps to be prosecuted there would be Mr McKinley, now an MP, and his agent. I think it's pretty unlikely that Nick Timothy would be charged, but if there was a court case, his name would obviously come up, much to his dismay and the dismay of people here in Downing Street.
Michael Crick. Well, now, still on the political front, UKIP donor Aaron Banks has suggested he's ready to stand against the party's only MP at the next general election. This comes after the former UKIP leader Nigel Farage called for Mr Douglas Carswell, the MP, to be kicked out of the party for trying to damage it. Mr Farage said he tried to remove Mr Carswell when he was leader in 2015, but didn't have the support within the party.
I've been